And welcome to this webinar on lessons learned from implementing digital education in Pakistan. My name is Atik and I'm the Asia Portfolio Advisor on the Girls Education Challenge, and I'll be moderating this webinar. So for those of you who don't know, the Girls Education Challenge was launched in 2012 by the Department for International Development, now the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, and it was a commitment to reach the most marginalized girls in the world. It is the largest global fund dedicated to girls' education, and it's currently in its second phase with 41 projects being implemented across 17 countries. Now, the GEC enables girls to complete primary school, transition to secondary education, and progress onto TVET or employment programs. Now, ACTED, who will be presenting today, are one of the projects being implemented under the GEC. The project targets out-of-school girls aged 10 to 19 and is being implemented in Sindh and the federally administered tribal areas, otherwise known as FATA, which are two areas of Pakistan with some of the lowest learning outcomes and challenging social environments for girls and women. Some of the interventions that ACTED are delivering include a 30-month accelerated learning program, preparing girls who graduate from the ALP for formal school examinations, and offering financial support through competitive business startup grants and internships. Now, the purpose of this webinar today is to demonstrate to other GEC organizations, as well as the wider sector, of why a digital intervention piloted by ACTED was not suitable for scale-up. We often hear from implementers about why their interventions were successful, but rarely hear about the unsuccessful ones. So in this webinar, ACTED will be presenting the findings from the pilot, discussing the successes, challenges, and what they would have done differently. More importantly, we hope you will gain an insight as to why ACTED decided not to scale the pilot and what factors and conditions are needed to be met in order for the model to scale. Now, a few housekeeping items before we get started. So the webinar, as Sharina has mentioned in the chat, is being recorded. We would invite participants to please keep themselves on mute and turn their cameras off. There's people joining from different parts of the world where the internet connection isn't so great. So yeah, that will be of real help. And we will take questions and comments at the end. If you do have any questions during the presentation, then please do put them in the chat box where Sharina has just written about. And finally, my colleague will be sharing an evaluation form at the end of the webinar, and it'd be great if you could all fill that in, as that helps us assess whether this webinar was successful and what we could do better. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Sadia Hussain, who is currently leading the ACTED Closing the Gap Educating Marginalized Girls project in Pakistan. She has been extensively working in the field of education, research, implementation, and evaluation for the past 20 years. She has been engaged with several girls' education projects, especially for the marginalized and impoverished communities of Pakistan. And her scope of work extends across all 4 provinces, where she has designed and headed several non-formal education and accelerated learning programs. Some of her notable research pieces include barriers to girls' education in Pakistan and the impact of stipend for girls in elementary schools of Punjab. So welcome, Sadia, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Atik, for a wonderful, short and to the point introduction to the project and to ACTED's work under LNGB program here in Pakistan. So welcome all the participants, and thank you very much for joining this webinar today. And we really look forward to your active participation and your interesting questions towards the end of my presentation during this webinar. Thanks again. So I can start immediately. As you can see, the title suggests that we will be presenting lesson learned from implementing digital education in Pakistan. Said that what were the findings, what were the recommendations that we were able to draw out from this digital learning program piloting. Next slide, please, Shrina. So just to share with you a brief introduction to the project, a background that how and where exactly did we pilot this program. As Atiq has just shared with us that currently we are implementing the program in two provinces of Pakistan, that is Sindh and KP province. And we piloted this digital program in Sindh province. As a pilot program, we selected 3 centers in that province, in Sindh province, under our accelerated learning program of GEC project. So it was almost 2 to 3 month long pilot study, which involved these 3 centers in the province of Sindh in Pakistan. And digital content that was applied was actually built in the tablets that was provided to the learners using an offline mode. And it was necessary to provide this content in an offline mode because this project is being implemented in one of the remotest areas of Pakistan where there is no internet connection facility available. Keeping in mind this fact, we, along with the service provider, designed a completely offline mode of delivery of this digital content. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as you can see, it was an Orenda project. Orenda was the parent company which has designed this Talimabad app. And some of you who are familiar with Urdu language, you might figure out that what does Talimabad mean. Talim is knowledge, and Bad is kind of a, it's used for a town or for a city. So Talim was a knowledge application sort of a program that was designed by Orenda project. So Acted primarily partnered with the Orenda project, and then digital content was then displayed through their app called Talimabad app. And then this Talimabad app was designed to not just be entertaining, it was also quite eye-catching. There was quite a colorful content that was built in this app to provide smoothest learning experience and to also maximize the learning gains and to make the whole app and the content quite interesting to the learners who were using this content. Next slide, please. So here I would like to share the steps or the actions that were taken in order to implement this whole pilot program. I would like to start first with the pre-pilot phase, which primarily included the initial field research. And what was there? What was included in the initial field research? It was just some preliminary interviews with the learners from the communities to assess what is the level of their acceptability to technology, to using any technology gadgets if they were to be introduced, tablets during the pilot program. What is their response to seeing this kind of content which is presented to them through technology? What could be the language barriers? So these were carried out during the initial field research, and Another important element that was included in this initial field research was the selection of the centers. We wanted to cover both rural and urban or semi-urban locations. This whole selection process was carried out in the initial field research phase. The next process after that was the pre-pilot test, which was used to establish the learning levels of girls. Obviously, this whole pilot was focused on our learning around the key learning outcomes of the learners. So we wanted to establish the learning level of our learners uh, at the baseline, and then we wanted to learn it maybe in a month's time, and then towards the end of the whole implementation. So as part of the pre-pilot test, this baseline assessment was actually established, and this baseline test or assessment was taken um, by the learners who were enrolled in those three centers. After that, lesson plans for full 8 weeks, which was 2 months pilot program. So for full 8 weeks was developed directly by acted team. And the subjects the, that were used for planning the lessons were those three key subjects: English, Urdu, and mathematics. So a full 8 week lesson plan was then developed, and then this plan was shared with Talimabad project team so that they could, build it in or sync it with their content, which was a ready-made content in their tablet. And that app was actually developed by the Talimabad project company. So they tried to, take our lesson plan and map their content with our lesson planning and our content. The content of the tablet, which was developed, had two main categories: the animated videos, lessons, and the second was the educational game. And as you can see, after that, the next phase was teacher training, because we were just about to introduce something very new to them, something very innovative and technology integrated. So it was very important to train the teachers how they use tablets for their students, how they are going to transfer this knowledge, they will make maximum and effective use of tablet in their classroom with their learners. A strategy for content delivery for the teachers was also developed. And then after that, once the implementation started, throughout the course of this pilot, we collected quantitative as well as qualitative data. So quantitative data was actually based on the assessment, which was taken automatically by the function built in the tablet. So whenever the learners were using the tablet, there was a feature built inside the tablet which was assessing the frequency of use of any content, the duration used, the duration of the time for which any content or any element inside that application was used by the learners who had their tablets. So that quantitative data was being automatically um, uh, collected through the app feature. However, for the qualitative data, which was collected by the Orenda field team, it was done by collecting responses of different stakeholders, including the girls, the learners, the parents, and the teachers through the interview. So that was mainly the qualitative part of data collection. So that's why our report had two kind of data collected towards the end, which resulted in a very comprehensive findings and recommendations. So one was the qualitative part and another was the quantitative part. Next slide, please. Okay, so actually, how did we plan this? What were the steps included in that? As I told you that in the earlier slide, that that what strategies did we use and how did we move from one phase to another. But in addition to that, I would like to go a little, uh, um, you know, before what had happened when we had made this whole plan of action. We approached EdTech Hub. So EdTech Hub is a platform which actually not just only builds the capacity of the organizations or the projects or the entities who are interested in trying something innovative or digital or technology integrated. It also connects you with the relevant stakeholders, and they guide you step by step that if you're interested in piloting something of this kind, then what exactly the steps or the scientific approach you need to follow. So they introduced us the first time this Sandbox planning tool. And Sheena, if you could just kindly show our, thank you very much. So this is a sandbox planning tool that was introduced to us, quite a scientific approach that was used to pilot this whole 2 month long program. And you can see that it's very simple tool, and simple to follow, and that's why I think we were really able to follow step by step approaches and strategies throughout our implementation. I would just quickly like to review these with you, that we were then guided by this EdTech Hub, that how we can collect data, how we can really capture the true picture of our implementation. So capturing tools were then suggested by them. And while using any data collection tool, what exactly should be our thought process, or what are our critical beliefs behind choosing these tools or behind designing these tools. So those critical beliefs were also explored and elicited from all the stakeholders that were involved in it. And then they also guided us on the frequency of data collection, that throughout the course of 2 months, how frequent we need to collect this data so that towards the end of the project, we have quite authentic and reliable results. And not only the frequency, it also guided us that what should be the time of collection. Is it when at the very early stage, or is it when the learners have been introduced a specific content? So all of that was also guided through this strategy. And then they also guided us for a sample size for each of data collection approach. So this is what you can see here. It's divided into 6 key columns, but it's very simple and quite a user-friendly tool that we experienced throughout our implementation of pilot program. Thank you, Shrina, for sharing this. If you could move to the same slide. Thank you. So the hypothesis that was used to assess actually the increase or decrease of engagement level of children was incorporated in this sandbox planning tool. And then in addition to that, we also monitored improvements in learning level as a secondary goal. So our primary goal was to assess the engagement level in our teaching process, but as a secondary level, we also wanted to see if there has been any change in the learning levels as compared to before using this digital content, and after we are done with the pilot. As I said earlier, that qualitative data was collected through interviews and questionnaire. So this is how we assess the engagement of stakeholders beyond the student level. And the participant of those questionnaire or survey were parents, teachers, and the field facilitators who were actually facilitating this whole process. Thank you. Can you move to the next slide, please? All right. So now I'm going to quickly share with you the findings from each of those 3 centers. So from center number 1, as you can see that we have divided it into feedback from students and feedback from parents, and then general feedbacks that I'll be sharing with you for each of these 3 centers. I've shared already that we had, 3 centers in total. There were remote centers, rural, underprivileged area of Sindh province. And this particular center, number 1, had ethnic group of learners and the community. So it was a very remote and a rural location in center number 1. The feedback from student that was received was that they would prefer using paperback books and notebooks and workbooks, as it allows them to practice writing and see the tablet as extra work. They kind of saw it as something which is added to their regular workflow. So they wanted to, they preferred the paper and pencil approach as compared to introducing this tablet. The feedback from the parents was that the tablet would be fruitful if more time was provided and the students were allowed to take them home for practice, because this was something very new. It was introduced to them in the classroom and they were still struggling to get really hold of it and to understand. So that's why they said that the learners should be given their own and personal computer tablets, and they should be allowed so that they really get pro at this. Another feedback that was shared from the parents was that using the tablet in groups of 4 to 5 students, it kind of diluted the value of the digital program. So there was, kind of a continuous competition that who get to use the tablet, who gets to use to even touch the tablet and to try its different components. Since it was given to a group of 4 to 5 learners, so each one of them did not get enough chance or opportunity to explore it or to really avail this opportunity of new form of learning. And other than that, they said that extra training or some kind of skill training is needed for the learners to use tablet effectively. And the ideal model that they suggested was that they wanted to include the traditional method of learning from books and tablets, and that is exactly what the learners from that center said. Next slide, please. All right. So, and what did the what was the center 2 feedback, which was again a rural area. There was a language barrier, although we are implementing this program, this whole project in Sindh province, but within that Sindh province there are some communities who do not speak Sindhi language, which is the local language of that province. So they are migrants from 100 or 200 years back, but they still use their own mother language, which is different from the local Sindhi language. So there was a language barrier there. Study participants were 22, and the 7 mothers and 4 fathers were also interviewed as part of our qualitative data collection. And from center number 2, the students' feedback was that initially they found the content quite interesting because it was something very new, colorful, it was all technology, and it was kind of interesting. But uh, as they were engaged more into it, they found out that over the course of the pilot, their interest had dissipated. And they said that generally they do not watch any cartoons and are more interested in watching serial dramas that are aired in Pakistan. So they had no interaction with the cartoons. So that was something very new to them, and they weren't used to this kind of content. And the parents' feedback from this center was that they perceive technology such as smartphone and tablet useful only for children living in the cities. And they said that they could not relate themselves to this technology, and they really did not find it quite valuable. And they said that these things are very frequently used by city people, and they just couldn't figure it out that how they are going to continue using it if it's being even implemented on a longer term in the centers or in the learning spaces. They also said that they would prefer using books that uh, uh, you know rather than using the tablets for their girls, because they had this a kind of concern that through the use of these technology gadgets, it might create some kind of, a protection or safety issue for their girls. They also said that they would allow girls to use the tablet or smartphones to study if the male members of the house have seen and approved all the content first. So this is exactly what I had just said, that they were concerned about the the safety and security of the girls, because they had that fear that through technology they might be exposed to some kind of safety threat. Next slide, please. So these are the findings from our last and the third center. Its location was kind of, if it was not fully urban, but it was semi-urban. It was a diverse community because it was quite close to the urban location of that province. Different languages were spoken. Learners already had exposure to these digital gadgets, and they were used to consuming cartoons on TV. They had electricity, they have cables, they had quite a number of or a variety of channels to watch. So they were already familiar with this kind of content. And study participant number was 20 students in this center, and 6 mothers and 2 fathers were interviewed here. Feedback from students was that they displayed enthusiasm for education, especially towards digital content while using the tablets, and they thoroughly enjoyed the content and they wanted to continue. So, which is quite the contrary what we experienced in the first 2 centers. They preferred using tablets over the books, and the parents' feedback was equally enthusiastic about digital content and education that we had introduced for their daughters. And they were in great favor of girls' education and in general. So you see, it wasn't just this digital learning that they were excited about. This center is a location where we are already observing quite good results, because parents are willing to send their girls to the students. Very less or almost no obstacles are faced by the girls for their education. They were interested in having best education for their children, so they wanted to try different strategies. They were open to that, and they would also like future programs to contain technology integrated content. They requested to give tablets for taking home, which is similar feedback that we had seen in other centers. And 50% of the parents, they actually um, expressed that they, let me just open my slide deck because it's kind of hidden. Yes, so 50% of the parents, they were in favor of girls working, yeah, after they finished their schooling, even if that entails girls moving away from the city. So you see, this center had very different dynamics. It was a different geographical situation or location, which really played a big role in having a different feedback from the parents. And the other half, which were not educated, from the parents, they were not in favor of girls working or moving out of the city. So next slide, please, Shrina. Thank you. Now, the key findings from the teachers that we have consolidated here on one slide is that teachers were hesitant and they faced issues in handling the tablet if they because they hadn't used it earlier. Also, I mean, although you can just recall from my presentation on that whole mind map that we had included our teacher training before piloting this whole program in the initial phase, but they were still hesitant. And the teachers who were familiar with the technology, they considered it as a positive learning opportunity for the learners. And some of them also considered it as an additional workload because they already had quite a pressure to finish their syllabus, their lesson plans, their scheme of work. And when this was introduced, they took it as something, as an additional burden to them. And less interest among the learners of age 14 to 19 years was observed. So younger learners, because we have two programs. One is the accelerated learning program for our younger learners, and another is the literacy and numeracy program. It is for 14 to 19-year-old girls who have been either dropped out or have never been to school, and they have no literacy level prior to this project. So more interest or higher interest was observed in the younger learners. Next slide, please. Now, the key findings from the facilitators who were facilitating this whole pilot project, not just at the level of the center, but also at the community level. And these are the key findings that were shared through the report or the evaluation report of this project. They said that with some changes in the model, the intervention can be made beneficial in increasing the retention level, because this is something new. If it is introduced effectively and more efficiently, then maybe we should be able to attract more girls to be enrolled, because since it's a very remote area where girls' education is the biggest hurdle or obstacle. So they said if we just introduce something new, maybe this can play as our tool to attract more girls and parents to send their girls to the learning centers. They also said that it has created a greater sense of camaraderie between them as they work together and help one another in trying to understand the use of the tablet and the content. So you see, it was something challenging. Although working in groups was not quite efficient way for the learners, but something in addition, a kind of value addition which was unexpected uh, in this pilot was that they were working together and they were trying to help each other to understand that content, to respond, or to click to the answers during the assessments. One center, which is Gulab Machi, it has seen the most positive response to this model, and that's the third center, which I just shared the findings about. And it was located in the urban setting. So this prompted them to want to transfer to that center. So actually, where we piloted in the urban location, the community automatically develop an interest, an increased interest of sending their girls to the center. But it was found only in that urban location of the center. The facilitators also provided feedback on challenges of logistics, content, model, and tablet use during this pilot, which I will discuss in our later slides, that what exactly the challenges in terms of administration or logistic support were faced. Next slide, please. Now, the key findings from the community was that the communities located near urban areas or the one which are in semi-urban locations, they appreciated more this use of digital learning. But the communities with diverse and cultural backgrounds, they were also very receptive, which we have seen in center number 3 in earlier slides. Next slide, please. Now, the general findings are here. Sharing the tablet, which I have shared again earlier, that sharing the tablet among 3 to 4 learners wasn't found very effective. Individual students weren't given enough time to practice what was being offered to them through the tablet content. So it was kind of, a struggle throughout the use of tablet, and they couldn't really get hold of what was being, taught through that digital program. The tool for measuring the level of engagement, as I said earlier, that it was built in the program, but then it couldn't measure the individual level of engagement because 3 to 4 learners at a time were using the tablet. It just measured a consolidated level of engagement, but it could not give us an answer that how an individual learner was engaged in that content. Teachers and facilitators took this program as additional burden. I've shared this earlier. And they were also they were required to take responsibility of this tablet, and considering remote area, they took it as a burden because they had to take the tablet home and bring it every morning the next day. They were always concerned of getting it lost or stolen. So this was quite an additional burden for them. Smartphones have a negative perception, and tablets are perceived as larger smartphones in those rural communities. So it increased resistance to their use, especially for girls. Another feedback received was about, again, the digital pilot locations. They did not include girls with disability. So this was kind of a gap by this whole project. However, only visually impaired learners, they were involved or engaged in this program, and they might be able to take advantage from this intervention, as there was an option of zooming in and zooming out, but the findings or the data wasn't collected on that. Next slide, please. So quickly, I would like to share the difference between the learning levels before this pilot was conducted, and after it was finished. So you can see that baseline digital data stood at 96.2%. As compared to baseline non-digital centers, it was again very close to what was the digital center baseline data was. That is again 96.8%. After a month, we assessed both digital piloted center and non-digital centers. And again, we found that the learning level or the learning outcomes were approximately the same. You can see that monthly digital center, it showed 91.0% of learning outcomes, while the monthly non-digital center, it again showed 92.9%, which is again very close to 91%. After or at the end of 2-month pilot, we again assess the learning outcomes, so which is titled as the bi-monthly learning assessment. You can again compare that bi-monthly digital learning outcome stood at 100%, but at the bi-monthly non-digital center, it stood at 92.4%. So here, towards the end, there was a difference, but again, it wasn't even around 14%. So not a much difference, especially when we keep in mind the investment in terms of time, effort, and finances and logistic that had gone into this project. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide is about, again, it's about the ALP learners' performance. So the earlier one was about their attendance, and this is about their financial performance, which I have kind of touched upon in my earlier slide. You can see that, again, there is not much difference. Baseline is at 10%, and at non-digital center, it's 9.5%. Monthly comparison, it's between 67.9 and 52.3. And then bi-monthly digital is again 91.3 to 77.2% as compared to the non-digital center, which I said that only 14% improvement, hardly 14% improvement was observed towards the very end. But throughout the course of 2 months, there wasn't much difference. Next slide, please. All right. So few recommendations that we were able to draw from the key findings and learning from this whole project was that individual access has to be given to the tablet for better learning and more efficient data collection on the level of learning and engagement of each learner. There should be unrestricted access to tablets in terms of time and use, so that the girls or the learners really get hold of how to use this tablet and the technology gadget, which was introduced for the first time to them. Regular charging arrangement and storage was a huge problem because these are very remote areas where we are implementing the project. which is mostly out of electric power during the day. So charging and handling was a big issue. Additional external audio devices were not there. So this is something that we would highly recommend that it should be there. Instead of tablet given to each student, maybe we can try to have one single LED screen. And this was also preferred, or in one of the feedback we found out from the teachers and the learners, that they would prefer one big LED screen in the center, which could have multiple purposes to use. Workbooks should be aligned with the content of the tablet. Since the tablet already had a ready-made material, the company had already prepared it. When we introduced our lesson plan, so there was a gap in alignment. We had introduced our content quite differently to our learners, and the content which was there in the tablet, it wasn't exactly matching with our lesson plan, with our scheme of work. So that was a big gap in the implementation. Lesson plans were designed, should be, so that's why lesson plans should be designed to go with the content in the tablet. There should be very comprehensive training for field staff and teachers with regular scheduled follow-ups and intermittent refresher courses. So the time that was provided was not enough to really build the capacity of the teachers to handle this new technology. In-house technology and content support should be provided consistently, and there should be immediate support because these were technology gadgets. No one was familiar with that. So there should be a technology backup. A whole team should be there to repair, to provide updates, and to make any last-minute fixes in the tablet. So that was missing. An in-house monitoring and evaluation expert should be responsible for the design of whole digital and initiative M&E framework and data collection. Next slide, please. All right. So just a last slide where we want to touch on the value for money. And this is what our analysis is, that very little value for money as compared to heavy technical support input. A good amount of financial input is required in order to support this whole digital program. There should be enough power backups required due to regular power outages in the targeted areas. Again, you require a lot of financial input for that. The pilot did not show considerable favorable outcomes in terms of student assessment results, which you have seen in previous slides. So no significant gain in learning outcomes or learners' attendance were observed. In terms of scaling up of this project, what we found out was that keeping in mind the results, acted and in consultation with the FM, decided not to scale up or continue the pilot. However, the findings have been noted to inform ACTED's understanding of the utility of this whole digital learning in remote areas. And if the recommendations that have been made, if they are taken into consideration for future implementation, we are very sure that we can introduce the digital learning in a much better manner, and we can prepare our communities and learners quite in a better way to have a success and to obtain better results towards the end. So this is it from my side. The presentation is over, and I think we can open the floor for question and answers. So thank you very much for being very patient, and thank you, Shrina, for facilitating this.
Thank you, Sadia, for that very thorough and in-depth presentation. So we do have some comments and questions in the chat, but yeah, maybe I'll go to Faheen's question first, but would also like to invite others. So there's a hand function at the top of this screen. So if you could raise your hand or put your comment in the chat box, that would be great. So yeah, Faheen has asked a question about the digital content and whether it was used by individual learners or by teachers. And yeah, she would like to understand a little bit more about the methodologies that was used in the classroom, and says that would be helpful. Faheen, if you want to expand on your question, then please do unmute. Go ahead, Faheen.
Hello, hi Atik. Hi Sadia. Thanks for the very comprehensive presentation. It was really interesting. So just to expand a bit on my question, I think what I'm trying to understand is that there are three actors in the learning center. So there's the teacher and the learner, and then there's the digital content. So I think I would just be interested in understanding exactly how were they interacting, or exactly how were they supposed to interact. Is the teacher supposed to direct the learner how to use the tablet? So is it a case of the teacher teaching the class and then I'm handing over the tablet to the learner to watch videos, or to do certain exercises? Or is this a case of the teacher just as in giving the tablet to as in 3 or 4 children, and then they just as in go over the content independently? So yes.
Wonderful question, Farheen. So allow me to explain that how exactly it looked like in the classroom. So you see one period in every classroom at our learning center is of around 45 minutes. So in the first 20 to 25 minutes, the teacher would introduce the topic according to the lesson plan or the scheme of work verbally. And then the tablet content was introduced in groups. And that content was kind of mapped with the the what she had verbally explained in the first 20 minutes. And then students were given opportunity to learn through that content which was presented in that tablet. So another 20 minutes was given to them to try and learn the content. And that was actually, this strategy was used actually to reinforce what the teacher had already explained in the first phase of the this whole teaching process. So that was supposed to reinforce. Now after that content, that when they had played, there were video games, there were some videos. After they were done with that, then in the third step, teacher would then assess their understanding verbally. After she was done with that, then the tablet, which was already there with the learners, they were asked to open the assessment section of that content. And then they would go to that assessment piece and answer the questions that were related to the content that they had seen. So you see, this is how the whole process inside the classroom was divided into 4 sections. First, introducing the content, then giving the tablet for reinforcement, and giving them exposure to the related digital content, then verbal assessment, and the fourth was the assessment through the assessment section built inside the computer tablet. So I hope I was able to answer your question. Thank you. You're very welcome, Farheen. Yes.
Brilliant. There's another a really interesting question from Emma Umbar. Emma, do you want to unmute? Not sure if you're...
Yeah, I could do. I found this really fascinating because we did a similar pilot in northern Nigeria, so I'm seeing a lot of similarities. But I was just wondering about the issue around the rural centre, which was in a more conservative area, and your comment about the sort of resistance to the use of technology, and whether you sort of saw that as a need to then look for alternative solutions and move away from technology, or whether your recommendation would be to address the social norms or that barrier of the community to using technology so that that could be overcome.
Thank you very much. Again, this is an excellent question and a very valid question. So based on the findings of this this whole pilot, what we did was that we went for a two-pronged strategy. We also, on one front, we kind of enriched our workbooks, because when we saw that tablet cannot be introduced at this point in time, so we further enriched our workbooks that we were already using. We further enriched our lesson plans. We enriched our toolkits, teaching and learning toolkits that we had introduced earlier. So we added more visual aids and teaching learning material into that teaching and learning toolkit. In addition to that, since the findings very clearly indicated that there is, due to social and geographical location of those centers, there is kind of resistance. So through our community mobilization, we gradually started introducing the good side of using technology, and the fear of them using tablet as if they were smartphones and they might expose their girls to social media. So that is a fear which we try to eliminate through our community mobilization, our talks with the community members, with the parents, with the center management committees. So this is exactly what we have started doing in our centers. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Sadia. There is a comment from Dr. Kazmi here, and I think what they're trying to say is that the digital materials will always sort of put students behind, although they seem attractive in the beginning, and that there's a need to study that a little bit more as to perhaps the reasons why. Dr. Kazmi, do you want to unmute and perhaps expand on your comment? Is Dr. Kazmi still online, or? No.
Yeah. So, but I'm reading her comment. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I can understand if the comment, and I can respond to that. So, actually, the main loophole in this whole process was that the content which was designed, it didn't match the age level of the learners, because these were a third-party service provider. They already had a ready-made material content which was prepared for very young children, and our girls are 10 years and above, and the content that was there, it was basically for 5-year or 6-year of age of children. And for for children around 10 or 11 years, it was okay. But for 14 years and above, it wasn't relevant at all. So I'm sure if we are able to redesign the content, if we are able to realign it with our lesson plan, with our scheme of work, and with our content in our textbooks and workbook, then definitely it can be used as a true reinforcement material. What was happening was that there was a big gap between the content that we were teaching. So due to this gap, utilize the content of the digital pilot effectively. What I would suggest that I think it has become inevitable to use digital strategies. We have to introduce these make sure that we go with a very structured and kind of a very organized approach. We cannot just take a content from outside and implement it. So that is exactly what happened. We just took a content from an outsider third-party service provider, and it was used as it is, which was not actually age appropriate for the learners of our project. If it had been tested with the younger children, I'm sure that we would have obtained different results. But there were many elements which which were not going as per our expectations. So it was the content, it was the age level, and also one several. So this is something that we need to realize. It's not that we say that the digital learning as a whole is kind of a flop. No, that's not. It's, we need to understand that what elements were there, what strategies we used during the pilot that did not work. So we need to find way forward or revisions in our own strategy, so that if we have to implement it in the future, we could do it as a successful project.
Thanks, Sadia. I'm conscious of time, but we have got a few more questions that have come in. So there was some discussion on VFM, which both Emma and Valsa have been debating in the chat, whether VFM can be assessed at a pilot or when it's scaled up. And then there's another question from Ian Disley about resourcing and how the digital pilot was resourced, and whether this was funded through Acted's own budgets, or whether there was additional costs that were provided perhaps by other organizations. So maybe do you want to take those two questions? And then I think we will probably have to close up there. But yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so thank you. So I'll respond to the second question first. It was, this digital pilot was budgeted in our own LNGB project, so there was no external budget that was used. So there was an allocated funds for this particular pilot. And your first question was about, I think, value for money. And Emma has suggested that value of money is a difficult one in a pilot, as often value for money comes with scale. Very true, very rightly pointed out. But again, at the same time, the 2 months pilot project also taught us that if we really have to go into this kind of endeavor, we have to have quite a strong technology support, logistics support, and administrative support, which wasn't the case during our pilot. There wasn't a strong technology team that we could utilize during this pilot. And we needed a lot of technology support at that point, because there was some tablets were going through updates, teachers were unable to do that. Although this third-party service provider of or render project was there, but if we go for a scale-up, we won't be relying on any third party. So we have to, and they had a huge team, but if we would like to implement this on our own, we would require that big team with us as well. Again, logistic support, timely handing over of the tablet, charging them up. There was no electricity there, so we needed extra backup. We needed UPS, to provide cables and then electricity for charging these tablets. So these are and a lot of financial, even during this 2 months course, a lot of finances went into that. So yes, your point is very valid, that if it was a scaled up program, maybe we could have had a bigger technology support, bigger logistic team to support all these elements that were highlighted during the pilot. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sadia. I think we've just run over time. So firstly, I'd like to extend my thanks to you on behalf of the FM on delivering this really interesting presentation. I think there's a lot of lessons that can be taken by other GC projects as well as other organizations operating in this sector. So yeah, really appreciate that. And thank you for everyone attending. I appreciate if you could fill in the feedback form that I've just posted in the chat. That will help us sort of assess how we're doing on these webinars. Again, thanks to the Acted team and Sadia in particular on that. I wish you all a pleasant afternoon, and yeah, have a good day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, all. Thank you, Atik. Thank you, Shrina. And thank you, participants, for your active participation. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. You all
Thanks.
have a good day.